One of the many sad and infuriating things in this life is that fools and criminals are routinely praised, promoted, and glorified as lawmakers, law enforcers, and heroes, sometimes even saviors, while the truly good people in this life who are out there making a difference are routinely deplatformed, demonetized, censored, and sometimes even killed. While YouTube and the social media giants in this life continue to elevate voices that seem to sink this country and the world into a deeper state of vile decadence and disregard for all things true, noble, and wise, it's refreshing to see that there are some people out there who actually care to take the time to uncover the truth wherever it may be found. That's why a couple years ago I decided that if my voice ever got big enough on any platform, I'd try to elevate the voices of those who appear to desire to bring the light of truth to a dark world mired in lies. I've highlighted this channel before in the past, and I want to reintroduce you to her again by way of the first couple of minutes of Really Graceful's last video entitled Loser's History, which highlights the strange death of water fuel cell inventor Stanley Meyer. The water fuel cell was a technical design of a perpetual motion machine. It would have got us off of big oil. Meyer claimed that a vehicle retrofitted with the device could use water as a fuel instead of gasoline and actually powered a vehicle with it and then died under mysterious circumstances. Here's the video.
Hey internet friends, and welcome to the very first episode of Loser's History. We've all heard that history is written by the victors, and a good chunk of what we learn from our public school education system is weaponized and muddied propaganda. Often only a one-sided snippet of the actual events that took place. You know, important, multifaceted events. Groups and individuals which have shaped our past and therefore our present. My new series takes a look at the big old losers of our history whose tales are seldom told. You already know by the title of this series that their stories end in tragedy. But what if we could actually learn from their mistakes? Our first loser of this series is Stanley Meyer, an inventor who aimed to put an end to our reliance on fossil fuels. A man who attempted to stand up to big oil. And a dude who took his last breath in the parking lot of one of America's favorite breakfast establishments. For the purpose of this video, even though it has a handful of definitions, we're going to define energy as what enables life and living conditions. Much of history and throughout the agrarian era, wood, when ignited, was the fuel that warmed our bodies and allowed us to cook and fill our bellies. Wood was the fuel of the past, but as the industrial era emerged in the 18th century, it was discovered that while steam engines could run on wood, coal was preferable as an energy source, because a ton of coal produced 4 times the amount of energy as a ton of wood. Coal wasn't the only ballgame in town, as it was discovered that whale oil, when rendered from the blubber of these mammals, could illuminate lamps, extending day into night. Whaling was reportedly the 5th largest industry in the United States by the 1850s. And oceans quickly became overfished and depleted. American whale hunting fleets were halted during the Civil War, but after the war, most didn't return to whaling. Instead, they shifted to a new energy source, the one we know today. While the first discovery of black gold was reportedly by the Chinese in 600 BC, it wasn't until the late 1850s that oil was unearthed in Pennsylvania, and eventually Texas. A few years later, John D. Rockefeller formed Standard Oil, and his big oil operation swiftly dominated American oil refineries and pipelines. ExxonMobil is what we now know Standard Oil as today. Meanwhile, the Rothschild banking family sought control of Russia's oil during this time, and commissioned a British trader to expand their oil empire. And eventually this affair was dubbed Shell Transport and Trading, which later merged with Royal Dutch Petroleum. And that's the Frankenstein oil baby we now know as Royal Dutch Shell. The British government got in on the action too, when they purchased a controlling share of the Anglo-Persian Oil Company that would eventually become known as BP, milking Iran's oil fields at the beginning of the 1900s. Supplying oil for the Royal Navy in the years leading up to the First World War. Countries with access to copious amounts of oil clearly had a strategic advantage in the world wars that followed. And not only that, but countries with oil became a major geopolitical prize in the aftermath of war. And I say all of this to demonstrate that the original oil monopolies were only 3 families. Families who controlled the lion's share of the world's oil, or we could even say the world's energy, for much of the 20th century. In 1908, Henry Ford introduced the Model T to America, an affordable automobile for a middle-class budget. His Model T could run off of oil-based gasoline and corn-based ethanol. And while the advent of the affordable automobile increased the demand for gasoline, it was rivaled by ethanol. Corn-based ethanol could be made by any old farmer by taking the kernels of corn, grinding them up into a flour or mash, extracting the sugars, then fermenting, distilling, and dehydrating the mixture. In a statement Ford gave to a New York Times reporter, he said, "The fuel of the future is going to come from fruit, like that sumac out by the road, or from apples, weeds, sawdust, almost anything. There is fuel in every bit of vegetable matter that can be fermented. There's enough alcohol in 1 year's yield of an acre of potatoes to drive the machinery necessary to cultivate the fields for 100 years." I mean, can you imagine being self-reliant for energy just from what you can grow on your own land? Or being able to purchase fuel from within your own community? No? Me either. If I were to ask you why Prohibition went into effect in the United States from 1920 to 1933, how would you answer? We're told that the national prohibition of alcohol manufacturing, transport, and sales was mainly attributed to religious organizations in their belief that alcohol consumption led to the destruction of the family and contributed to crime rates across the country. However, it's curious because despite its influence in world wars that a ton of people died in, as well as my ability to travel from point A to point B, and my freedom to drown my sorrows in an effort to forget all those things, I don't remember learning much about big oil in my high school or college history classes. Strange. Reported in the New York Times, the Anti-Saloon League received over $500,000 from John D. Rockefeller to help spearhead the Prohibition movement. To put that into perspective, $500,000 in 1915 is the equivalent of over $12 million in today's money. Once Prohibition was enacted, it was not only illegal for people to purchase alcoholic beverages, but it made it illegal to purchase or manufacture any kind of alcohol, which included ethanol, meaning it became a crime for farmers to easily distill their own fuel, and instead they were to depend on a gas supply. What a coincidence, right? Henry Ford created an automobile that a middle-class family could afford, and it was able to run on fuel that a middle-class family could make themselves if needed. And suddenly, that became illegal to do, and over the next decade, mafia families rose to power. A foreign banking system took hold of the United States monetary system. Another world war occurred, which, among other things, yielded in more oil territory for a handful of families to pillage. And here we are, after all this time, sucking the teat of the United States Incorporated. These coincidences work in such mysterious ways, don't they, internet friends?
Okay, there's 11 more minutes left in this video, so we're not even at the halfway point yet. To watch the rest of it, I'll leave a link to it in the description and in the pinned comment. If you end up visiting Really Graceful's channel, let her know High Impact Vlog sent you. I think you'll agree with me that this is one of those videos that should have a wide audience with millions and millions of views. Check this out. In spite of her stellar like to dislike ratio and all the positive comments, as of the recording of this video, it hasn't even cracked 30,000 yet. Let's see if we can give her a hand by liking and sharing it. Leave your thoughts about this in the comments section below, and let me know who else you think we should highlight. I'll see you guys in the next heavily censored shadow ban video.